All right, wasn't quite ready for that first.
It's okay.
Hold on 1 second here. I will get it rolling. All right. Apparently I'm on the struggle bus today.
It's Monday. That's completely loud.
Okay. Oh wait, it says host has disabled screen sharing.
Try and see if it works, please, again.
Perfect. Now it works. Can you guys see?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
All right. So I'm going to be talking about communication, effective communication and why it's important, and the different ways to communicate. Personally, this is very important to me. I am a big part of the treatment team and I have a lot of communication with patients, and I just feel like it's one of the largest ways to impact care and the most effective way to influence positive behavioral change. So a little bit about me, a little bit quirky, as I'm sure you can see by all my colorful slides. I am originally from Ohio. I came here for my undergrad a long time ago-ish, and I just never left. I really liked it here and ended up getting my master's in business administration and my master's in social work from WVU. And then I started here at WVU Medicine about 7.5 years ago. These are my fur children. A couple duplicates. I don't have like 15 fur children, I promise. But these are my babies, spoiled, rotten, and ornery. So communication, there's a lot to say about it. So I'm going to try to get the most important parts out. This quote, communicate even when it's uncomfortable or uneasy. The best ways to heal is simply getting everything out. This quote I really connected with, and I feel like it's so true. You know, reading this, I think a lot about being a case manager and being part of our orientation group. One thing that I always stress is communication with your team and how not only communicating with the team kind of helps you get everything out in the open, but it also gives you the opportunity to get feedback, encouragement, and to see things from a different perspective. So why is communication so important? So first and foremost, communication builds trust. Trust is absolutely a crucial part of any kind of relationship, whether it be provider to patient, patient to patient, like when we're in a group together, or within the team that you work with. Once you have that foundation of trust, you can then develop a better understanding and appreciation for each individual person and the experiences they've had. And that fosters an environment that's much better for conflict resolution and being able to work through and talk about differences in opinions and differences in perception. And through that, you develop and cultivate a sense of mutual respect. And all of those components together are very, very important in being able to influence and educate the change process. So the next few slides, I'm going to touch base on some things that everybody's pretty familiar with. It's probably just going to be a little bit of a refresher. Probably use a lot of these things innately every single day and doesn't really occur to you. So the first are the barriers to communication. There are tons of potential barriers. These are just a few. I'm not going to go through all of these, as I'm sure it is not needed, but one I do want to briefly touch on is perception. Perception is a barrier that sometimes I think is a lot harder to navigate through than some of the other ones, because not everyone's able to put their own words, put into words what their perception of a situation may be, or they're not able to understand how another person's perception is different than theirs. So I think that that's one of the most challenging barriers. This slide, I have the 7 C's of communication. Just a quick kind of fun way to remember some different aspects that'll help communicate more effectively and more easily. So first we have in the top, clear. So make sure that whatever you're saying, your objective is clear. Avoid complex, intricate phrasing. You know, everyone knows the phrase, keep it simple, stupid. This is basically that. Keep it simple, keep it easy, very clear to the point. Be concise in what you're saying. Don't go off on long tangents when trying to explain and then forget where you started. So try to just be concise. Concrete, be specific, give facts. Don't fluff what you're saying. And then we have correct. Make sure you're giving correct information and using the right level of language. So know your audience. You don't want to be explaining something and having the look of glazed over, I do not understand a word you're saying. So making sure that you understand the audience that you're talking to and you're using language and phrasing and words that are going to connect with them and allow them to understand what you're saying. Coherent. So this is, you know, making sure that what you're saying is making sense. Making sure that it flows in a logical way. And then it's easy to follow. And then complete. Exactly what it sounds like. Just make sure you're providing all the information that you need for your message to make sense, or all the information that you need to provide in order for something to take place. And then the most important is courteous and caring. In my opinion, I believe that's the most important. So you want to be tactful, you want to be kind, polite, and you want to show empathy when communicating and talking to others, and it creates a level of connection that just helps with all of the other components. So this slide, just a few things to kind of remember to be mindful of when you're working with someone who's upset or beginning to become upset. The first thing that I have on my list is one of my favorite things ever, and I think I say it like 15 times a week and I use it all the time, is the 3 Ps. So you want to pause, process, and then proceed. Using the 3 Ps is helpful when you're trying to work with someone upset, but it's also really helpful to use in just everyday situations to make sure that you're thoroughly thinking through the implications and the consequences of decisions or actions that you make. You know, it kind of forces you to take the time and space to let your emotions take a back seat. I know I've used this multiple times in our groups, and it's fared well in some cases, and it doesn't always work. But I have found that saying, why don't we pause for a minute and process this, and then we'll kind of move forward and look at it, usually gets a lot better results, because it allows for that space and it allows for validation of feelings and experiences. So now that we've done kind of a little bit of a refresher on communication and communication styles, I kind of want to look at the importance of communication and what some of the different components are within our COPE model. So this slide has a ton of information on it, but a little bit of a breakdown. So the top line is just looking at each of the different roles that play an important part in our treatment team. So we have the prescriber, your group and individual therapist, the case manager, and then the medical assistant. Each of these roles play a different part in that communication line, and each of the different points are going to require different attributes or components of communication. And then in the middle line, I have some of the different kind of key components of each role and what those look like with communication. So under the medical assistant, they're typically the very first point of contact, and their communication and interaction can set the tone for the whole entire appointment. So it's very important that they're being conscientious of the way that they communicate, and that it trickles down to all the other components of group. And in the very bottom, I have put the top 3 C's from the previous slide that I think are most critical to that role. So for example, in the case management role, I selected clear, concrete, and courteous. So in the case management role, you need to be very concrete and concise and clear in what you're saying or explaining. You don't want to use vague generalities or leaving tons of ambiguity. This can create a lot of misunderstandings, lead to assumptions that then can later cause problems or just things to happen that aren't intended. But we also need to make sure that we're being very courteous and showing a lot of empathy. I've seen many times where this component is not used as heavily as it could have been used, and the situation has gone in the completely opposite direction. You know, there are so many times when in the case management role, we're talking to patients and we're telling them something about a policy or procedure, and there's a large potential that it's not always going to be received well. But I've found that being very clear and concrete about what I'm saying while showing that empathy and caring and understanding for the fact that, you know, I get it. I understand this is going to make life so much harder. And, you know, just having empathy for the difficulties that it may provide for their situation makes all the difference in their perception of how that conversation goes. So this slide, I'm just talking about a little bit of, you know, the important components that are utilized in our treatment team and in our programming and in general, things that are going to help with that communication and making sure that what is being perceived is what you're intending. You know, being open-minded, not non-judgmental, and being okay to say, I messed that up, or I don't know the answer to that, are some of the ones that I think are largely important. Another big kind of component is solution focused. You know, taking all the different people on a team and knowing that we're all working towards the same goal helps with creating that baseline of trust, because we all have the same end game in mind. You know, we all want to help patients. We all want to make sure that they're getting what they need and we're helping them in the best way that we can. So having that core component and keeping that goal in mind kind of help direct all the other components. And then, so I'm kind of going to give an example of how the treatment team works together with communication and how that all works out, even when you may have different opinions or different thoughts or think that things should go a different way. So actually this past week, we had a patient that was referred to our ICOPE programming, which is 3 times a week He was frequently using atazolam and marijuana. This was his second time being referred to ICOTE in 90 days or less. So we were wanting to look at, what kind of specific plan can we put together to help him so that he doesn't move to weekly and then come back to ICOTE. So initially, when he had come to ICOTE the first time, given the psych history, we kind of bypassed his time in ICOTE and referred him to our dual COTE group, which was new at the time. And it manages MAT and psychiatric medications together so that hopefully, we can get them on a good, stable foundational ground so they can progress in our program. During this time in dual COTE, he really struggled, wasn't really getting that foundation that we were hoping for, ended up going inpatient. As soon as he got discharged from inpatient and began COTE again, he was immediately struggling. Ended up being referred to ACOTE and then ICOTE again. So the second time when he came around and we were talking about it in treatment team, one of us wanted to have him complete the time in ICOTE, formulate a better plan, take the time needed to see, what other things are going on. And another person on the team wanted to refer right back to dual COTE because they felt that was going to be the best way to manage their current situation. So, we kind of spent some time talking about that in treatment team, and we, there were two people felt very strongly on either side. It wasn't, that one person felt super strong and the other one didn't. It was both individuals felt super strong on opposite ends. So we decided to kind of pause. We took the week, decided, all right, we're going to see what happens this week. We're not going to necessarily make a decision right now. After this week, when we come to treatment team, the following week, we'll kind of reassess and see, is this either one of these going to be the best plan of action or something totally different going to work better. It ended up being that the next week when it came around, we could very clearly see that neither one of our plans were going to work as we hoped. So we were able to work together, come up with a totally different plan that had components of each, and ended up working out in the best way. The patient is getting what they're needed. They're getting the help that they need in the best possible way. And, it's all because we had open communication. We weren't afraid to say, hey, I don't agree with that. This is what I think and why. We used very clear, concise language and active listening skills. We were listening to what one another were saying with the sole intention to understand. We wanted to understand where they were coming from, understand their reasoning, rationale, and from there we were able to work through, problem solve, and move forward with the situation. in a positive way. And then this is just another quote that I really like about communication. It's the quality of your communication is the quality of your life. So the better you communicate, the better and the deeper your relationships are going to be, and the more sustenance they will have. And I believe that is it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Olivia. No, that was great. And I like all your colors in your slides. So, and the nice quote, I mean, communication obviously in your field is very important, but in our everyday lives and relationships. And I think it's a constant thing that we're growing and learning, because I'm not the best at, being patient with my Spanish, Irish background. So it's a work in progress at all times for me. Does anybody have any comments or questions? Quiet today.
So I just wanted to say, thank you, Olivia. I think that was a good example of treatment teams don't always agree, but how to then come to a consensus. Perhaps a new solution can get generated out of the disagreement. And I think that kind of mutual respect, listening to one another, being open to developing a new perspective, as Olivia was saying, is super important. Many of us work in a medical model where what the doctor says goes, or what the prescriber says goes, and that's not necessarily the culture of the COAT treatment teams. Now, if it's a medication decision, obviously what the prescriber says goes, but if it's really a general, more broader treatment decision, negotiation can be really important. So thanks for sharing that example, because working on treatment teams, people don't always agree, and that's okay. It's what you do with that process.
Oh, absolutely. I think at one point, even during that treatment team meeting, I pointed out, I was like, I think this is the first time that we have disagreed and have been on totally opposite ends. So obviously that's saying something. And, from there, it was kind of made it a little bit easier to navigate and work through and problem solve.
Thank you so much for that comment, Laura. Go ahead, Tony. I see that you unmuted.
Yeah, thank you, Elizabeth. Yeah, I think philosophically about communication all the time. And the older I get, the more I realize how difficult communication is, because you have the sender of the message, the receiver of the message itself, how it's delivered, verbal, written, video, whatever. And the sender and receiver have a whole life of experiences that impact how they might even consider a word, how they define a word. So that message can be defined differently by the sender and receiver. And just as a side note, I think that's why we have a lot of the political disagreements that we have, that we're defining things differently. And but it's very hard to always say, how do you define whatever word? But the question that Laura brought up, which is about the treatment team and how, it's kind of a different model. I have to say, integrating into the treatment team at Chestnut Ridge and Morgantown was fabulous. As a novice working with experienced people in this field, it was, just a great group of people that were very patient with me, and I learned so much and really never had a lot of issues with the team up here at all. But I have noticed with the expansion grant, there has been at times, remarkably, that has been the most difficult thing. It has seemed how treatment teams view maybe treatment in general, what recovery looks like. And I was just wondering, for the people that have been on treatment teams for the longest, or have particularly powerful, strong relationships, did you start out when you did this model with defining what goals look like from all of your perspectives? Did you ever disagree on, not just the treatment a plan of care for a particular patient, but what the goals were for patients in COAT. Like Laura and Olivia, people that have been doing this the longest. Dr. Baltiera, what did you ever like build that foundation when you were first with the new team?
I think so. I mean, I know whenever I was training, when I first started, that's kind of how it was introduced to me, is what components of the team are important for the case manager to bring to the table, and like what information and how that impacts decision making and what that helps. So, you know, looking at obviously the logistical things like cancellations and things like that, but also, you know, it was explained to me as looking at their interactions with the other people of the team. Do they, you know, is someone acting one way and being completely, you know, rude or ignorant to this staff person, but then when they come into group, it's totally different, because that is a part of their care and that's a part of their treatment, and seeing all of the different sides of that creates a whole picture.
I think one of the benefits of teams is we can, again, if there's trust on the team, we can serve as checks and balances for one another. So I will never forget, this was probably 15 years ago. Dr. Sullivan and I had a plan for a patient. She was continuing to use cocaine and not being honest about it. And we were going to, at that time, refer her to a higher level of care and take her out of the COAT setting. We had a plan. We talked about the plan. She talked to me. She talked to him, and he completely changed the plan. And I was like, what are you doing? I mean, I was really, really angry. But it occurs to me that was like I've been working with him for a couple of years. That was the first time he had ever done that. And I also felt safe and comfortable going to him and saying, this is not what we agreed on. What happened? And of course, what happened is she cried. And when women would cry with Dr. Sullivan, he would give in to them. Like, they knew this, they would talk about this, or they would talk to me about this. I don't know if they would talk to him about it. And so I was able to give him that feedback, like, you know, whether she was being manipulative or not. I'm sure she was upset, you know, that he was going to have to get a little bit better tolerating strong emotion from patients, because it didn't necessarily mean that we should change the plan. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, but if you're going to change it, you need to bring it back to the treatment team. And so it was really like an ongoing, evolving negotiation. And I think the foundation of it was about being able to be open to hearing each other without getting defensive, or without saying, you know, I went to school for longer than you, I know more than you, you know, those places that people can go when somebody holds up a mirror. And so building a team takes time, and, you know, our teams have evolved. So it has evolved with the changing face of, you know, addiction and the overdose epidemic, which has caused us to make decisions differently about treatment, and not everybody sort of moves and shifts with those changes at the same rate. And so it can absolutely be challenging.
Thank you so much for that feedback, and really great question there, Tony. Does anybody else have any feedback or comments they would like to make before ending this session? Gonna get some time back this evening. All right. Well,
Actually, I mean, it is an opportunity. I'm sorry. It is an opportunity for people to share some of their struggles on teams, because, you know, that's part of, it's like we present cases, we can also present kind of team cases where people can share how they resolved conflicts, or particular conflicts that arose that are still kind of being worked through. If people would be, you know, be comfortable sharing that, I think it is an opportunity.
One of my team members is in the chat, so it makes it awkward. But it's going well. We're doing great. She's the best communicator that ever communicated. And we have no trouble keeping her focused.
That's good team support, Derek. I appreciate that.
Very clear and concise messaging.
Well, I just found out that's how I'm supposed to be.
Glad you're paying attention. Good job, Derek.
So the only other suggestion I have is that, again, Olivia's pause part. So if the team is not agreeing, you're not going to do that in front of the patient in a patient care setting, or you're not going to hash that out. So pausing and saying, we're not ready to make a decision about this this week. We're going to talk as a team and come back and let you know. Like, we have absolutely done that when it's been clear people are not agreeing. And it may have been like a spontaneous thing where a patient presented something and we weren't necessarily going to agree on how to respond to the patient. And so that's okay too. And it's actually, modeling for patients that it's okay to kind of take a minute, take some time to think about what to do before you take action. Or take a week, as it may be.
Thank you so much. Does anybody else want to make any comments or share stories? All right, so your next session is canceled due to the holidays. So we just want to thank you all for all that you do and really hope you have a great holiday, whichever you celebrate or not. Please eat some good food, cookies, eggnog, whatnot, and have a joyful time. And then the next time we'll meet will be January 10th, and Michael Reynolds is going to be discussing 12-step program basics for providers. So I appreciate everybody today, and we'll see you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good holiday.
Yeah.
Happy holiday.
Bye.